Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I inherited a quiet lakeside property from my uncle, I thought I'd found peace. Then a smug HOA president knocked on my gate demanding a key for the community. What followed was sabotage, threats, a sting operation, and one hell of a courtroom showdown. When my Uncle Henry passed away, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad. He was one of the few people in my life who actually understood the value of peace, but because the man had lived life on his own terms. He died the way he lived, alone, quiet, and surrounded by trees. It wasn't until I sat across from his lawyer in a stuffy little office in downtown Raleigh that I realized he had left me more than just his fishing rods and dusty coin collection. He left me his land. A sliver of paradise tucked behind a thicket of pines with a hand-built pier that jutted into a glittering lake like a wooden finger defying the modern world. There was no driveway, just a winding gravel path. No lawn service, only wild ferns and stubborn roots. And best of all, no neighbors. Or so I thought. It didn't take long after I moved in to fall for the place. Mornings started with coffee on the dock. Evenings ended with the sound of frogs echoing off the water. The gate at the end of my trail, black iron rusted at the hinges, marked the line between my world and the rest of civilization. That gate was everything. It wasn't just metal, it was silence. It was freedom. That was before the HOA came sniffing, specifically a woman named Karen Stanton. She introduced herself like a senator greets donors, wide smile, empty eyes, and that distinct suburban confidence that made me instantly uneasy. I spotted her approaching one Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, walking like she owned gravity itself. Her first words, "Mr. Hayes, your property lines border the new Lakeside Oaks community. We've recently voted on enhancing lake access, and your gate is ideally located." She said it like I'd won a prize. I blinked, unsure what she was getting at. "We'd like a key, or better yet, we can install a digital lock, something our security team can manage." I actually laughed. It wasn't forced. It was genuine, sharp, confused amusement. "I'm sorry," I said. "Who exactly are you again?" Karen's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. They narrowed slightly, calculating. "I'm the president of the HOA, Lakeside Oaks. You may not be a member, but your cooperation is in everyone's best interest." That's when the tone shifted. I saw what she was hiding behind that smile. Authority she wasn't entitled to, but fully intended to wield. "This is private land," I said, stepping toward the gate, "and you're not setting foot past it." Karen tilted her head, the smile still there, but now it was condescending. "You can choose to collaborate or deal with pressure from the community." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. That smug, tidy threat hung in the air like humidity before a storm. I closed the gate. I latched it. And as she walked away, I had this gnawing feeling I hadn't felt since basic training years ago, like the ground beneath me was shifting. Peace was over. The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox that looked official. Thick paper. Embossed logo. Too much ink for a neighborhood newsletter. I opened it on my front porch with the kind of casual curiosity that turns into full-blown rage halfway through a sentence. It was a notice of violation from the Lakeside Oaks HOA. Let that sink in. I wasn't even in their jurisdiction, yet here they were, citing me for unauthorized obstruction of community lake access, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony, and, my personal favorite, non-cooperative behavior with HOA development strategy. At first, I laughed, but as I reread the letter, something inside me coiled up tight. It wasn't the absurdity that got to me. It was the precision, the legal tone, the audacity. Someone had taken the time to fabricate these charges and slap a watermark on top, just to make it look legitimate. A few hours later, I got a ping from a buddy who lived 3 blocks away. "Hey man, you seen this?" Attached was a screenshot from the Lakeside Oaks Facebook group. The post read, "Some individuals believe personal interest outweighs the collective good. Rest assured, the board is taking measures to secure access to shared natural resources for all residents." There was a blurry photo of my gate in the background, zoomed in like I was a criminal hoarding water rights. The comments were a mix of passive-aggressive applause and open speculation about my mental health. Some even suggested HOA-funded legal action. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I was angry, burning. fists clenched under my pillow like I was ready to punch the moon. You don't mess with a man's land. You don't come into his peace and mark your territory like a dog on a hydrant. The following day, I discovered that someone had broken the lock on my gate, not just fiddled with it. They'd snapped it clean, the shank lying in the dirt like a warning. I found tire tracks too, fresh ones, a few cigarette butts near the trail, and most bizarrely, charred sticks and beer cans near the water. Someone had held a bonfire on my land. I reported the trespassing to the local police. They sent a deputy who took notes, shrugged, and muttered something about civil boundaries being complicated when HOAs get involved. Great. That was comforting. By the end of the week, I got a call. Unknown number. I answered. I wish I hadn't. "Oliver," said Karen's voice, sweet as cough syrup and just as fake. "I heard you've been upset. That's unfortunate." "You mean about people breaking into my land and burning trash near my dock?" She didn't flinch. "We're trying to avoid unnecessary legal conflict. You don't want to lose access to your own service road, do you?" My jaw clenched so hard I felt my molars grind. Was that a threat? "A suggestion," she replied, still smiling through the phone. "Think of the community. Think of the children who could be enjoying that lake." I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't yell. I just sat there, phone still in my hand, staring out at the pier. That lake, once so still and perfect, now felt like bait, like the cheese in a rat trap. They were coming for more than a key. They were coming for control. By the time the second lock was snapped and my private property signs were torn down like cheap Post-its, I knew I wasn't dealing with suburban discontent anymore. This was a siege. The HOA wasn't trying to negotiate. They were testing my patience, my limits, and probably my sanity. But they'd underestimated me. They thought I'd fold, sell, let them stomp around my land because their power came from group votes and matching polos. What they didn't realize is that I don't intimidate easily, especially not on my own soil. So I did what any man would do when cornered by an army of smug clipboard warriors. I laid a trap. First, I replaced the lock on the lake gate, not with another padlock, but with a custom-built steel latch wired to a hidden motion sensor tucked under the overgrown ivy like a snake in tall grass. I added a wildlife camera, infrared, with cloud backup, then a second one at a higher angle, and then I hid my third camera, the good one, in an old birdhouse facing the dock. I didn't stop there. I ran a dummy power line across the path, just visible enough to be suspicious. It wasn't hooked to anything. It was bait. Finally, I contacted Officer Delaney from the Sheriff's Department, the only cop who seemed to take me seriously after my last report. He was ex-military, had a dry sense of humor, and, crucially, hated HOAs. I gave him the time window I'd narrowed down after weeks of incidents. Thursday nights, just past midnight. "Let me guess," he said on the phone. "They think you won't do anything because you live in the woods and talk to ducks." "Exactly." "Cool," he said. "I'll bring backup." Thursday night arrived. I brewed strong coffee, strapped on my old camping vest, and settled into position behind the thicket just 30 feet from the gate. My thermos was full. My cameras were live. My heart was steady. The only thing that jittered was my middle finger, itching to salute the first flashlight that crossed the trail. At 12:43 a.m., I heard them. Whispers, the crunch of boots on pine needles, flashlights flickering through branches. 3 figures emerged. 2 in dark jackets, 1 in what looked like a rent-a-cop uniform with a badge that read HOA Security Division. Amateurs. They approached the gate with purpose. One guy was carrying bolt cutters. Another had a tool pouch and a small crowbar. They didn't speak loudly, but I caught bits and pieces. Karen said to leave the new lock intact if possible. Whatever. Just snip and swap the latch. 2 minutes tops. Then they reached for the gate. The moment they did, the motion sensor chirped, triggering the silent alert I'd synced to Delaney's phone. What happened next was poetry. Red and blue lights burst through the trees like a firework finale. Sirens wailed. The entire trail was instantly lit up like a stadium. One of the men dropped his bag and screamed, "I kid you not, we're just doing lake maintenance." The guy in the HOA uniform tried to run, straight into a patch of thorns. He screamed again. Another tripped and fell flat, arms out like a flying squirrel in full panic. Officers swarmed them. Commands were shouted. Hands raised. Knees hit dirt. The bolt cutters clanged to the ground like a cowbell on a condemned farm. I stepped out of the shadows with my GoPro in hand and a smile I'd been holding in for 2 weeks. Officer Delaney spotted me and gave a casual nod. "Evening, Mr. Hayes. Looks like your trap worked." "Better than I expected," I said, still recording. They even brought props. The HOA rent-a-guard tried to talk while face down on the ground. This isn't criminal. It's a community mandate." Delaney chuckled. "The only thing you're mandated to do is shut up and wait for your rights to be read." I watched them get cuffed and walked off one by one like ducklings who'd wandered too far from the nest. Their expressions were somewhere between confusion, entitlement, and sheer disbelief that this wasn't going to end with a stern warning and a pat on the head. As the last cruiser pulled away, I stood in the middle of the trail, under a now silent night sky, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Peace wasn't back. Not yet. But war had officially begun. I thought the arrests would bring this insanity to a grinding halt. They didn't. If anything, the HOA doubled down. Within 2 days, I received a letter from a law firm in town. Slick logo, 6 names on the header, the kind of firm that advertises on golf tournament banners. The letter accused me of intentional obstruction of community expansion efforts, willful endangerment of public access rights, and, get this, hostile provocation against peaceful neighborhood governance. They were painting me like a rogue militia leader who barricaded himself in a fishing shack. But I wasn't surprised. I was ready. Before they could start slinging lawsuits like frisbees, I hired a real attorney, not a flashy one. Her name was Rhonda Mason, and she worked out of a 2-room office above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. First thing she did when I walked in, she handed me a notepad and said, "Tell me everything. Don't hold back, especially the petty stuff." So I did. The fake violation letters, the vandalism, the threats, the Facebook slander, the HOA security team breaking and entering, and, of course, Karen, queen of clipboard diplomacy. Rhonda nodded through all of it, scribbling like a court stenographer with caffeine in her veins. Then she leaned back and said the 4 words I didn't know I needed to hear. "This is going to be fun." The next week was a paper hurricane. We compiled my deed, plat maps, aerial photos, the original survey from my uncle's estate, and tax records showing my parcel had never, in any legal or geographic sense, belonged to Lakeside Oaks. Rhonda even pulled archived zoning maps from 1986 just to be petty. Meanwhile, the HOA was throwing everything they had into the public narrative. They posted statements on Facebook, Nextdoor, even a full-page ad in the community bulletin. We believe in unity, transparency, and shared access to our natural surroundings. One individual should not hold the entire shoreline hostage. They made it sound like I was sitting on a throne of bones, laughing while children wept on the other side of the gate. What they didn't expect, what Karen definitely didn't expect, was that I'd start fighting back publicly. I released drone footage of the damage done to my trail. I posted photos of the scorched patch near the dock. I uploaded security footage from the night the security team got tackled by police. And then I shared my favorite piece, a split screen of Karen smiling for the HOA picnic brochure, next to a freeze frame of her screaming at Officer Delaney in the cruiser spotlight. It went viral. Comments poured in. "Wait, this is happening in our neighborhood. The HOA has its own security force. Why does Karen look like she just lost a WWE match?" The court date was set, but that wasn't the biggest shock. No, the real bombshell dropped when Rhonda subpoenaed HOA internal emails and found a thread between Karen and several board members outlining a plan to intentionally apply pressure to me until I capitulate or sell. The subject line, Operation Gentle Squeeze. You can't make that up. With this, Rhonda filed a civil suit for harassment, defamation, criminal trespassing, attempted land seizure, and conspiracy to defraud property rights. The sheriff personally served the entire HOA board at their next public meeting. Karen tried to play it cool. Let's move on to landscaping complaints. But her hands shook. Someone caught it on video. I didn't even have to post that one. The neighbors did it for me. The HOA had gone from ruling by fear to starring in a slow-motion implosion. And as I walked out of Rhonda's office that day, holding a folder thick enough to stun a bear, I felt something strange. Not relief. Readiness. Because this wasn't over. The real battle, the one with a judge, a courtroom, and the eyes of the whole damn neighborhood watching, was coming next. Courtrooms smell like dust and tension. That's the first thing I noticed as I stepped inside. The second, the row of HOA board members seated in polished suits like a lineup of nervous wax figures, and there, in the middle, trying her best to look composed in a navy blue power blazer that couldn't hide the panic behind her eyes, Karen Stanton. Her face was pulled so tight into a smile it looked like it might snap off. I took my seat beside Rhonda Mason, who wore a soft grin like a sniper waiting for her shot. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Honorable Celia Brower, gave the room a once-over with the kind of gaze that had probably reduced attorneys to puddles for sport. Let's proceed. HOA's lawyers opened with a statement that was more performance art than law. They painted me as uncooperative, combative, even dangerous to the fabric of community harmony. One of them used the phrase territorial paranoia. I nearly choked on my coffee, but Rhonda let them speak. She didn't interrupt, didn't object. She just waited, and when it was her turn, she stood, adjusted her collar, and said calmly, "Let's talk about facts." She began with the deed, my deed, clearly outlining private lake access. Then came tax records, historical zoning maps, satellite images, witness statements from neighbors, footage from my security cameras, the body cam video of HOA security being arrested. The cherry on top, emails from Operation Gentle Squeeze. With each new piece, you could see the cracks forming in their defense. The courtroom grew quieter. Karen's glossy confidence began to melt. One of the board members, a man named Todd with the face of a golden retriever who ate drywall, visibly sank lower in his chair with every page Rhonda presented. Then it was Karen's turn to testify. She walked up to the stand like she was headed to a photo shoot, but under oath, her voice shook. "Mrs. Stanton," Rhonda began, "you claim the gate in question provided essential access to the community lakefront. Is that correct?" Karen nodded quickly. "Yes, for everyone's benefit. Even though this gate leads to private land not under HOA jurisdiction, I believed it did fall within the area of general use. And this belief led you to instruct members of your board to enter Mr. Hayes' land without permission." I didn't instruct them directly." Rhonda pulled up a printed email chain. "Do you recognize this message? Sent from your HOA address to your board. Pressure is working. If he won't give us the key, we'll make him miserable until he does." The courtroom gasped. Karen froze. "I don't recall writing that," she whispered, eyes wide. Rhonda slid the physical copy to the judge, along with verification from the hosting server. "And yet, you did." By the time Karen stepped down, she looked like a balloon 4 seconds before it pops. Red-faced, twitchy, completely deflated. The judge called a recess. Karen didn't go to the board's table. She just sat, alone, hands on her lap, staring at nothing. When court resumed, Rhonda called the deputy who arrested the intruders. His testimony was swift and brutal. "They were equipped with tools for forced entry," he stated. "Told me they were maintaining access points per Karen Stanton's request. One of them yelled something about lake maintenance. At 1 a.m., laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge smirked. When the verdict finally came down, the air itself changed. We find the HOA and its acting president, Karen Stanton, liable for harassment, criminal trespassing, attempted coercion, and coordinated defamation. This court orders the HOA to pay $250,000 in damages to Mr. Hayes. Mrs. Stanton is personally liable for an additional $100,000 and will serve 6 months probation under court supervision. Furthermore, the current HOA board is hereby dissolved pending investigation into organizational misconduct." Karen didn't move. Not at first. She just blinked. Then she turned, slowly, toward the gallery, where her neighbors sat. Some whispered. Some shook their heads. One woman covered her mouth in disbelief. Karen's lips trembled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked human. Not superior, not smug, just broken. I stood as the judge left the bench, heart pounding with victory. Rhonda leaned toward me, murmured with a grin, "Told you this would be fun." We walked out of that courtroom to a waiting crowd. Neighbors, local reporters, a few stunned HOA members looking like they'd seen a ghost with legal documents. Someone clapped, then another. Soon it was a full round of applause. I didn't wave, I didn't gloat, but inside I was on fire because I hadn't just won a case. I'd burned their entire illusion of control to the ground and salted the earth beneath it. The silence felt different after the trial, not fragile like before, when I was always listening for boots in the brush or locks clicking in the dark. This was real silence, earned silence. No more notices in my mailbox. No more phantom meetings at the edge of my gate. No more cryptic calls or fake inspectors sniffing around my land. The only visitors now were squirrels and the occasional neighbor dropping off baked goods like I'd just returned from a war. And in a way, I had. The HOA, as it was, didn't survive the fallout. The board was formally dissolved, and a court-appointed oversight committee took control of all financial operations. A forensic audit uncovered that Karen had authorized over $40,000 in community initiatives without votes or transparency, most of which went toward consulting fees and, amusingly, custom signage for the fake community lake entrance. The HOA's lawyer resigned 2 days after the verdict. He cited philosophical misalignment. Translation: he didn't want his name anywhere near that disaster. Karen's world, meanwhile, collapsed with quiet precision. Her position as president, gone. Her standing in the neighborhood, obliterated. She tried to save face in one final community newsletter by claiming she was stepping down for the sake of unity. But screenshots of the court verdict were already circulating faster than gossip. Someone created a meme of her face on a Monopoly go-to-jail card. It made the rounds in group chats and wound up printed on t-shirts at a local block party. As for her personal finances, probation wasn't the worst of it. The restitution fines were real, and thanks to the HOA's mismanagement under her leadership, her own neighbors voted to file a separate civil claim against her for reputational damages to the entire community. Last I heard, she put her house on the market. Asking price, ambitious. Reception, brutal. Todd, the board member who sank in his chair at trial, quietly moved out a month later. No one threw him a farewell party. The fake security guard who got caught in the thorns that night, fired from his gig with the rent-a-cop agency. Turns out attempted trespassing while screaming about lake maintenance doesn't look great on a resume. And me, I got my piece back. The pier remained exactly where it was, now with an upgraded lock and a new sign, simple but firm. Private lake access. Trespassers will be photographed, prosecuted, and memed. I added that last part after Rhonda and I had a drink to celebrate the settlement checks clearing. She laughed so hard she nearly choked on her bourbon. Neighbors I'd never even spoken to before stopped by to shake my hand. Some apologized. Some asked if I'd be willing to attend the first meeting of the newly restructured HOA as an honorary guest, not a member. I went out of curiosity, and it was different. No suits, no smugness. Just folks talking about potholes, barking dogs, and ideas for a community garden. It was normal, human. One man, an older resident named Cal, stood and said, "Before we move on, I just want to thank Mr. Hayes for reminding us what boundaries actually mean." There was a pause, then scattered applause. I just nodded. I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for air, for space, for a return to sanity. And, at long last, I had it. Peace didn't mean no noise. It meant knowing no one was trying to steal your shoreline while pretending it was a favor. Summer came back like it owed me something. The air had that syrupy warmth that makes you slow down whether you want to or not, and the lake shimmered like it knew it had been the prize in a battle it never asked for. I stood at the end of the pier one morning, toes hanging over the edge, coffee in hand, just watching. The same view I used to take for granted had now become a symbol, not just of peace, but of principle. And then, like a cosmic nudge, I got an idea. Not a barbecue, not a speech. Something better, something that felt like closure, but also like a celebration no one could hijack or politicize. So I hosted the first annual Kayak Court Regatta. Invites went out via hand-painted wooden signs around the neighborhood. All residents welcome, costumes encouraged. Bring your own kayak, floaty, paddleboard, or steal a pool noodle. No HOA approval required. The turnout was absurd. Inflatable flamingos, paddleboards shaped like pizzas. One guy showed up in a kayak, duct-taped with cardboard fins, and introduced himself as the HOA Shark. A retired couple from 2 streets over paddled in on a giant inflatable unicorn holding martinis in plastic cups. I hadn't laughed like that in years. We held competitions. Fastest flip, most useless watercraft, dramatic sinking. The winner? A 12-year-old kid named Evan who wore a powdered wig and stood in a plastic tub, screaming, "I object," every time someone splashed water near him. The crowd voted to rename the dock. They called it Hayes Landing. Someone carved it into a driftwood plank and nailed it to the gate. I didn't stop them. Toward the end of the afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the last of the absurd water jousting calmed down, I spotted something unexpected. Karen, standing at the tree line, not close, not armed with papers, just watching. She didn't wave. She didn't smirk. She just stood there, hair loose, no clipboard, and, for the first time since I met her, not trying to be in charge of anything. I lifted my coffee in a silent toast. She nodded once, then turned and walked away. No drama, no words, just the quiet sound of shoes on gravel, and maybe that was enough. As the sky turned lavender and people packed up their kayaks and unicorns, I sat at the edge of my pier, legs dangling into the water, a burger in one hand, and the carved Hayes Landing sign behind me. No HOA bylaws, no fake citations, no community mandates, just me, the lake, and a community that had learned, sometimes the loudest boundary is the one you quietly defend. Victory doesn't always roar. Sometimes it floats by in a flamingo raft, sipping lemonade and wearing aviators.